Well, our scripture reading this morning comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 26. And Genesis chapter 26 is not a chapter that comes up if you're going through the lectionary 3-year cycle of readings. But it is a really crucial chapter because it's the only chapter that focuses on Isaac. So you might remember that there's Abraham, one of the fathers of our faith. And Abraham had a son named Isaac, and Isaac had a son named Jacob. And we hear a lot about Abraham and Jacob, and a little bit about Isaac as it relates to Jacob, but this is really the only place where Isaac's story comes through. It starts this way. Isaac and his family went through a terrible time because over in the land where they were living, there was no food. And so they did what any family would do. They moved to the next land. This happened to be the land of the Philistines. And they were foreigners there. But God appeared to Isaac and said, "I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give these lands, and I will fulfill the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your offsprings, your family, as numerous as the stars of heaven. And I will give you all these lands, and all the nations of the earth shall gain blessing for themselves, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." So even though they were foreigners in a foreign land, they stayed, and Isaac and his family began to do pretty well. They planted fields, they started gathering a flock, and as their flocks and herds grew, they became very wealthy. Now the Philistines saw this and started to grumble. They were a little jealous, and they were a little afraid that maybe Isaac and his family were getting a little too powerful. And they said, "You need to leave. Leave our land. You need to go somewhere else." So Isaac and his family left that land, and they went simply to the next valley. And when they arrived there were shepherds tending their flocks that lived there, and they became upset. Isaac dug a well, and the shepherds said, "No, you can't have this water. This is our water. You need to leave this land." And so Isaac and his family had to keep moving. But he named that well, as he left, he named it Conflict. So he went to the next valley and they dug yet another well. But there were goat herders in this land. And they became upset too and said, "You can't stay here. This water, this land is ours." So Isaac dug a new well, but he named the one that he left Sitnah, or hatred. Isaac went to this last valley and dug a new well, and this time there was no fight. And so he named the well Rehoboth, or enough, because he said, "Now the Lord has made room for us. There is enough, and we shall be fruitful in the land." To mark this moment, Isaac went back to Beersheba. Beersheba means the well of promise, and this is where his father Abraham and the king of the Philistines had agreed to peace long ago. And Isaac built an altar, and he thanked God. And God said to Isaac, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you and will bless you and make your offspring numerous. And Isaac had the people dig a well there to see if they could find water again. Now the Philistines saw what had happened to Isaac's family, and so the king went to Isaac. Isaac said to him, Why are you here? I thought you hated me and sent me away. But the king said this to Isaac, We see plainly that God has been with you. So we say, Let there be an oath between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you so that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done nothing to you. You are blessed by God. I wonder what King Abimelech saw that made it clear that God was with Isaac. But Isaac agreed, and they threw a big feast. And later, Isaac's workers came and said they had found water in Beersheba. And he named the new well the same thing his father had named Sheba, or promise, because of the Philistines' promise of peace and God's promise of a good life. And a city arose in Beersheba and is still there to this day. May these words be to us our light and our life. Thanks be to God. Well, it is World Communion Sunday, a time when we gather around this table remembering that this bread, this juice, connects us to Christians all around the world. Perhaps they're having communion with different things than we have on our table, different kinds of bread. Perhaps it's wine instead of juice, or something else. But there's this seeking of unity together as Christians on this day. Now, we've been going through 4 weeks of creation season. We've been gathering at this fountain, talking about water. And truly, water is the thing that connects not just Christians, but all life on this planet. You know, when we turn on the water that comes out of our faucets, we don't think a lot about where that water has come from, where those molecules, the smallest parts of that water, where they started or where they might have come from. Sure, upstream from our faucet is perhaps a river or an aquifer, groundwater. Perhaps up from there is rainwater. But even the rainwater that comes out of the clouds has come from somewhere where it's evaporated off the land, off the seas. Could the water that we would drink, the water that you drank today, could it have come from the Indian Ocean? Could it have last been on land in China? Water molecules can stay in the ocean for 3,000 years. Wonder where the water that Jesus drank has ended up. We are connected by water. It's so easy for us to get water, but for almost 1 billion people in the world, they spend most of their day getting water. I know you've all been wondering why this is here. This is called a jerry can, and in many places of the world, especially in Africa, this is the way that people carry water. It holds about 5 gallons, or 20 liters. Fully filled, it's about 40 pounds. This is not fully filled. Sylvia was 10 years old. She woke up in the morning, she stretched wide awake, getting ready for her day, and she heard her mother call, "Come on, children, come down, it's time for breakfast." Everybody hurried down to eat because everybody had a job to do in Sylvia's family. Sylvia lived in a very small country, Burkina Faso, in Eastern Africa. Now, her mother had to go out and collect firewood. Her father and oldest brother had to go out and tend to the field. Her younger brother went to school. But Sylvia and her sisters, their job was to go and get water from the river 3 miles away. So Sylvia ate her breakfast, grabbed her water jug, and began the long walk. And the whole time she walked to the river, she counted her steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And as she counted her steps, she also dreamed. Because where she really wanted to be was at school with her brother Felix. And she wondered, what was he learning today? Was he learning the letters of the alphabet? Was he learning how to count and add? Was he learning how to read? Well, it took her and her sisters most of the day to go to the river, to fill their jugs, and to carry them back on their heads. Good thing it's not full. 3 miles there, 3 miles back. Later that day, after she got home, she asked her brother Felix, "What happened at school today?" And he said, "Oh, we learned the most amazing thing. We learned that 1 liter of water contains 10,000 drops." And she said, "Oh, how I wish I could be at school with you." And he said, "No, don't you see what you do is so important to our family? You bring water that we need to drink and cook and wash things." Well, this continued, of course, every day, 3 miles to the river and back. Until one day, Felix came home very excited, her brother, because the teacher had said that news had come to the village that they were going to have a well. Some aid workers had been in the area and told them that they were scheduled for a water project. And sure enough, a few weeks later, Sylvia watched as a huge machine drilled a hole right in the center of their village, and water sprung up. She was so excited, not just because there was water in their village, but because she got to go to school. This story reminds me that one of our own beloved children in this church, Sean Lundy, having been raised here and grown up as a youth in this church, went off to join the Peace Corps. And one of his goals when he arrived in Togo was to go to a small village that had no well, and try and bring water to them. Well, 2 years later, when Sean's time with the Peace Corps ended, still no well. He worked very hard on it. He managed, through the help of our congregation actually, to build some latrines, which helped keep some of the water they had clean. But building a well is no easy thing. Sean's returned back to Peace Corps this year, doing slightly different work, but I know he continues to hope for water for the village he was in, and all these villages without water. And even as we help people like Sylvia get better access to water, we would still be in trouble. Even if all of the villages had a well, there would still be trouble. There is still trouble brewing for all of us. Because if things go as they are, researchers predict that by 2025, 1.8 billion people in the world will face severe water shortages across the globe. And 4 billion people will live in water-stressed conditions. That means they will need or want more water than is available. Why are we facing water shortages in the world? Well, some water is not safe to drink. Did you know that half of everyone in global hospitals are there because of a disease they got from their drinking water? Half. Also, rivers and lakes are drying up. The way we live is causing the earth to get hotter, taking away some of the places that people usually get water. Rivers, lakes, aquifers. And demand for water is also increasing. The water we use is not just the water that comes out of our faucets. It takes water to make the food we eat. Did you know that a cheese sandwich takes about 56 gallons of water? Add a bag of chips, it's another 12 gallons. If you want a slice of turkey and a can of pop with that and make it a lunch, it's about 200 gallons of water. Well, what do people do when they're faced with shortages? What do we do when we know there's not going to be enough of something? Sometimes we do what the Philistines did to Isaac. We try to keep it all for ourselves. We hoard it, we hold on to it, and we'll fight anyone who tries to take it from us. But what else can we learn from the story of Isaac? Isaac believed in God's promise of a good life. Isaac believed God's promise that God would be with him always. Isaac believed in God's promise of descendants more numerous than the stars. But today we don't have the luxury of doing what Isaac did and simply going to the next valley. We cannot just find another lake to drain or another river to divert. The abundant life that God promises, that we as spiritual descendants of Isaac have inherited, cannot simply be about more of everything. If we go back to the story, we think about where God was in it. If God was leading Isaac, he didn't end up at the well of more. Remember the name of the well. The name he gave to the well he found was enough. Today, we too must find enough in what we already have. In fact, we must find ways to use less and share what we already have. Perhaps the abundance we are promised is not more water. Perhaps the abundance we are promised are the many ways God is with us in this calamity, urging us onward, giving us courage, opening new possibilities, confronting inequity and injustice, and renewing our hope. How much water do we have left? Well, if you imagine all the water of the world being this full jug, and you take out all the salt water of the oceans, and you take out all the water that is trapped in glaciers, and all the water that is inaccessible in the ground, you end up with something like this much. of usable fresh water for us all to share. All agriculture, all industry, all people, all animals, all living things. How can this be enough? How, with God's help, through God's presence, can this be enough? This is all we have. Amen.